Welcome to Keeping Up with Data. Keeping Up with Data is the podcast that keeps data enthusiasts up to speed with what is happening in the data world. We bring in the leading minds from the data industry to talk all things career, news, embarrassing stories, failures and successes.
So something really important for us here at Precision Sourcing is mental health. It's something we've been focused on a lot over the last year or so. And we're lucky enough to have partnered with the Black Dog Institute. And we're going to be doing a lot of events with them this year. A lot of our events and money will be going towards them. And they're out there aiming to create a mentally healthier world for everyone. So if you wish to support the cause, please donate via the link in the bio on this podcast. And you'll be seeing a lot more information about Black Dog over the next year.
Welcome to another episode of Keeping Up with Data. I'm Emily. This is Sean. And we've got a very special guest today, Mark Fazackerley. But I'm not going to give you an intro. You can introduce yourself, so take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm a misplaced New Zealander. I've been here 24 years, roughly. So for all of those 24 years and a few years before that in New Zealand, I've been involved in the data, analytics, BI space, always on the vendor side, well, nearly always on the vendor side. Started off as a software developer many, many moons ago. So in the last 24 years, I've been with many of the mega vendors. I've worked for Oracle, Hyperion, Microstrategy, a bunch of companies in in that space, which has been an interesting ride.
Awesome.
Right now, I run the Qlik business across Australia and New Zealand. I came to the business through the acquisition of Talend, which completed earlier this year, where I'd been the manager there for a few years. So. Yeah, it's interesting times.
Bit of an evolution.
Absolutely.
Big brands as well. And interesting that you've come from a development background as well. Maybe we'll start there.
Sure.
Because obviously that's really helpful for someone being in a really pivotal sales role and a legacy sort of.
Absolutely. I think when I started, I was developing in a New Zealand object-oriented language. And in fact, that's sort of how I got into BI. Back in those days, in the dim, dark recesses of time, if you wanted to report, your options were few. It was typically you create a form in your development environment, or you might have embedded something like Crystal Reports, which was big back in those days, or possibly, you may have a relationship with the back then the Cognos and Business Objects of the world were sort of the only real names around, and the term business intelligence didn't even exist.
Yeah,
it was all about reporting and dashboards.
Yeah.
And so, that's how I sort of found myself in BI. I discovered I was much better with developing the reports than I was as a software developer, ironically.
Did I also read something that you were on a sales floor of was it a retailer or a menswear brand?
Correct, I was. I started my career even further back in the recent time as a menswear salesman. Yeah,
sales is in your blood, yeah.
So, look, it does seem to be the case, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool. Well, obviously you're at Qlik now, the evolution of many big brands before that and acquisition like you mentioned. So what's Qlik up to at the moment? Maybe we could start there with sort of where you're at.
Yeah. So, Qlik's on a journey to be the independent platform of choice across everything from sort of the disk, if you like, to the pane of glass. The only bit in there that we don't do really in that journey is we don't have our own database, because why would you? This world's got plenty of databases, and with Snowflake around, you're in a no-win proposition there anyway. Many of the other hyperscalers. So what Talend brought to Qlik was a very mature data ingestion, data governance, data integration tool that fleshed out many of the gaps that Qlik perceived in that disk to screen vision. And ironically, of course, Qlik had a lot of the bits that Talend didn't have, so the overlap actually was very, very small. The two companies fitted together like two pieces of a puzzle. It was quite interesting as I came on board to see how well we did fit.
How does the transition with two companies so big merge together? Well,
this is my third or fourth acquisition. I got bought into Oracle back in the late noughties. It goes as they all do. This is probably a little more problematic because the companies are more equivalent in size. When Oracle buys you, they roll in with their templates, and it's like, this is how you're going to operate from there on, and you don't really get to say no. It's not really an option. It's a single point of contact as a term you use for a reason, right? So So Qlik is consolidated around a single go-to-market strategy and offers that wide portfolio through a single point of contact. So yeah, it's an interesting place to be.
Yeah. And I suppose like from a Qlik standpoint, like you said, you guys have a very broad offering, and obviously maybe I'm massively assuming here, but Qlik is seen as a viz tool just to a lot of data people.
Right.
So how are you guys on the cusp of that AI journey?
Yeah, well, I mean, Qlik's been doing AI for quite a long time, actually. I mean, we all know AI is not new. It's been around since the 1940s. In its current form, you know, what's popular at the moment is Gen AI, generative AI. What we've been embedding for quite some years into our platform now is the ability to ask natural language questions, utilizing a back end that supports that. And in fact, you know, when some information is presented to an interface, there's an option to say, what insights can you tell me? Like, tell me what's going on. So a lot of people say, well, what's the context of the data? And it's difficult to deliver context to people, particularly if they're not subject matter experts. And so having that capability to not only deliver some context, but learn from the things that are most interesting. So we have a machine learning algorithm in there that works out what the people are asking about, and thus serves up accordingly. So we've been doing that for quite some time. So we see ourselves sitting in as, making use of the tool in an appropriate way for the audience that we typically serve. Usually decision makers somewhere in the business.
Yeah, okay, got you.
But it's kind of interesting to say because you're right. Qlik is a data viz tool, and the last few years, it's perhaps, along with a lot of the data viz tools, has become a little bit below the surface, if you like. I mean, the days of the big shootouts between mega vendors over who's going to win the reporting and visualization platform at BHP or you pick the mega company, they've all kind of been and gone. We have a huge customer base in the Australia New Zealand region, some really monster sites. But yeah, you go and start to talk about data integration, and look at you and like, but aren't you the data viz guys? Yeah, but we got this too.
Yeah, you must see that, Sean, because Sean does more of the BI sort of recruitment, and then I sit in the data science space, which obviously runs like, I suppose, intertwined anyways, but yeah. Yeah,
you've obviously got your Microsoft, you've got your Power BI guys, then you've got your Tableau guys. They had the big Salesforce boom a couple of years back.
Yeah.
But yeah, Qlik from my side of things wouldn't be as in demand, but keen to see how you guys are going to elevate that with AI and come in.
Well, I think if you look at, I think I've been to a lot of conferences in the back half of the year, and as you can imagine, pretty much, AI, I think one of them was giving away sort of like AI bingo, see how many times you can say Gen AI.
Yeah.
But there's been some very interesting things come out of that, and I think the future that most people see is using AI to augment, human workers. Like we can automate people, we already do that. Robotic process automation, we any of the tasks that can be automated, in my experience, are jobs that people don't want to do anyway. It's that boring, mundane, horrible jobs that somebody has to do. So, all we're doing is elevating the capacity for higher value work in the organisation. And so if you can use AI to then augment that higher value work, you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting those nasty jobs that nobody wants to do, like rekeying a spreadsheet or something like that. Writing some copy for the next day. It's like, oh, really? And instead you get the AI giving you some input on what it is you're doing or looking for or looking at.
Yeah. Just going slightly off topic, well, not off topic, but still definitely very related. You mentioned the RPA side of things. I seen you were with Blue Prism.
I did a couple of years at Blue Prism. I joined, I think I was a third or fourth person on the ground here, and they had, I think we had 187 in the world, and when I left it was about 2,000 people.
That was back in the I think you joined, when was it, 2017?
Yeah, something like that.
That's when I first started my recruitment journey, and Blue Prism was the RPA.
Front and centre, that's right.
Yeah, it was a big one back then on the RPA front, but it's slightly pushed.
And so, RPA helps a lot in those kind of tasks. And at the time, I saw some terrific use cases come out of Telstra and NAB and Qantas, and that made genuine differences to the way they were doing business. But then when you step out of that world, you realise that it really is just a band-aid for a proper integration strategy. Because part of an overall integration strategy, it's great, but really you're still just replacing that that quite fragile human process.
So when I came over here, it was just like RPA,
huge,
big place for me back in 2017, but it's just gone off the grid now.
It has a bit, yeah.
Tangents, but coming back to AI, because obviously everyone's counting how many times people can say AI. But like, I suppose, how can you, like, from your perspective, what about, like, with the boom, how can you create sort of long-lasting AI strategies across ANZ? Because, and as any business, maybe an enterprise scale, because that's where we're at.
Yeah, great question. I think for AI specifically, I think you really have to be ready for change, because it's, it is the embodiment of agility, if you like, in terms of iterative development. I mean, every few days they're consuming more data, more information. As more data becomes available, models get refined. So capabilities are going to continue to grow. I think when I was back in the pre-dinosaur days doing my training in software, I mean, the term garbage in, garbage out is a truism that remains even more true. And in fact, in the RPA days, as much as it is now for AI, it's incredibly important that the data foundation that you're using to feed into these processes is, trustworthy, accurate, rock solid, where it's been, what's been done to it, and it's sort of the gold standard, if you like. Because the thing that automation does is it has, whether it be AI, automation, or RPA, it has the capacity to go horribly wrong at speed across a whole lot of places if you make a poor decision. And I have seen that occur in RPA implementations where they realise that there's been a poor data stream come in, and suddenly all decision making, particularly if they're using, as many of them may well do, some of the earlier capabilities around, image recognition, handwriting recognition, and things like that. So yeah, so I think that's really what folks need to focus on is, you may only be building a cottage now in your business, but you should build a foundation for a skyscraper, because it's going to get big. So you put that solid base in, it doesn't matter how big or small it gets on top of it. And that fundamentally relies on an architecture that has capacity to plug data in and out at will, and also to measure the veracity of the data, because it's so important.
That was going to be my question, actually, is like you said, the architecture needs to be like rock solid, but how come so many people get it so wrong?
Yeah.
Like if everyone, well, not everyone, I'm assuming, but you just said it's obvious, it needs to be done right. Like, where's the disconnect?
It's the hype, isn't it? Everybody wants to just jump straight on the train.
Well, yeah. I mean, I remember when data lakes and big data were first a thing.
Yeah.
And you'd have all these, I think I was at Oracle at the time, I remember. You had people ring up saying, I need to get me some big data. You go, okay, for what? Well, Harvard Business Review said it's going to change the world, so I need me some of that. Like, right, it's really strategic then,
Yeah.
And so I think AI is a little bit like that right at the moment. There's there's a lot of talk about it, and a lot of being used in a lot of places.
Yeah.
But we don't really necessarily have line of sight as to where it's going to fit into many large enterprises. There are some really unusual use cases coming up in companies that you sort of don't think about. Wow, that's an unusual way to approach it. But again, it's really about how do I help free up our workforce to do other things.
Interesting. Yeah. It's also like managing risk and their complexity.
Starts with governance, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Day one, really.
Well, very true. And we've had some pretty high profile data leaks in the last couple of years, and particularly after the Optus one, the phone rang hot around data governance, and the Latitude one as well, because they had data that was so old, 17 years old. I mean, you have no right to hold data that long. So like, how did this even happen? Well, you've got no governance, clearly, to say this needs to be deleted on, such and such a day.
Yeah.
And so our phone rang hot. But data governance is a bit like MDM hasn't been in its day, and some of these other initiatives that are really not technology products. Technology facilitates them, but the project itself is about organisational change, and they are hard. And not many organisations have the appetite in all honesty, to actually follow right through on that. They usually start, have a crack, get a little bit away and go, oh my God, and the guy who started it said, yeah, I'm adding up with this amount.
Yeah.
And so it becomes problematic, So to your question, how do you make sure it has some longevity? I think it's just got to be able to be, if you like, solid foundations, resilience to plug things in and out as they go.
Like a concrete slab in a building.
Pretty much,
Yeah.
And make sure you can pull the building down easy and put a bigger one up or a new one.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, got you. What about like the, I suppose, at scale and like managing the risks and complexity, but then you mentioned change there a couple of times. I suppose like we don't see a lot of like change manager roles come through that are like specific for that. I think there's a gap in the market for that kind of skill set to manage change on big data programs like that.
Yeah.
Do you see like a gap there yourself?
Interesting you say that. No, I can't say I've necessarily seen it other than, as a vendor representative in 24 years, I've seen more data projects than anybody that doesn't work for a vendor will ever see. So most people in their career might do, a dozen, half a dozen or a dozen projects. Most companies sort of similar. As a vendor, I get to see lots of them, some of them more than once, which is the interesting bit. And I think that really is a massive gap in how do we make sure that this wonderful thing we have prepared and presented and now going out to roll out, that everybody's ready for it, knows what to do with it. And what's more, how does that endure more than 6 or 9 or 12 months? How does that keep going? And I think years ago we'd talk about centres of excellence, and I think most of those have sort of fallen into disfavour because they proved to be difficult, to make them work. A bit like the MDM projects I just talked about, they're a lot harder than they look.
Yeah.
You need a champion in the business, like, don't you? Someone who's going to really drive be like the go-to person and is dedicated to it rather than...
Yeah. I think, if we look at how some organisations are rolling out sort of agile frameworks and taking on board, utilising chapter leads and, preserving the craft. I mean, it's sort of going in that similar direction, but it's much more decentralised and much more holistic in its view. The COE by its nature is sort of a elitist structure, if you like. Whereas agile development is by definition, in fact, all about democratisation of work. Like you all decide what's highest priority and you go do that. And I think that's going a long way to help, in, particularly in the data world anyway. I can't really speak to other parts of the business.
I feel like the change side, I don't know if it's kind of like what the analogy of like you've let a kid get away with murder for ages and then you come in and you try and change something, they're always going to go back to like what they've been doing or the misbehaving. So yeah, I can see that as a challenge for a lot of people at the moment. You said, I suppose you've seen it a couple of times. That reminded me of a bit of technology debt that we talked about. Like, I'd be keen to see or hear what you've seen.
That's an interesting question. There's a lot of technology debt still around, of course. We have, mainframes still running most of the banks. Mainframes running a lot of the government payment systems. I mean, there's still one of the only mainframes in the world still running out of Canberra settling payments. 132 of them left in the world of that particular mainframe.
Wow.
So, and then on the other side of that is how do we avoid... So obviously at some point they become superseded, but we are way past lifetime already on many of those things. So the technology debt there is huge, and that's not going to be easily replaced. What I find, or what I'm seeing at the market at the moment, is companies still creating more legacy debt. I mean, I think one of the key use cases that's coming out of AI, I guess, in the software world is that potential to augment development capabilities and to be able to create code bases and document them and so forth, which is fantastic because code bases are notoriously difficult to document and developers are notoriously lazy. I know I was, and you only got to look at what's going on and, as I say, in the mainframes, millions of lines of code, who knows what half of them does. A lot of people don't. Spaghetti code. And when I see organisations say, oh, well, we're going to bring a bunch of coders in and use, X, Y, Z language to develop, they go like, why would you do that? There are so many no code, low code options available for almost anything you want to do now. That, building an ivory tower, running 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 developers, I'm just not sure why you do that unless you're a development house. Yeah. And so when I hear companies say, we're not going to buy that, we're going to hand code it in Python or DBT or something, I was like, good luck to
Do you think that the DBTs of this world and the Airflows and those type of guys, that's just going to be like another repeat of mainframe?
Absolutely is.
Generation?
Absolutely. I mean, DBT code doesn't maintain itself. It's not auto maintaining and updating, or Glue or any of those sort of low-level languages. So, yeah. I mean, it's a good, it has it definitely, there's a lot of companies that see great utility in that kind of flexibility, and far be it for me to decry that, because there are many use cases where you have to write code.
Yeah, totally.
But when you don't have to, I'm not sure why you would choose to, other than you want to create a development capability for some reason. Yeah, but often political.
Yeah.
What would you say, like, the maybe top 3 things that you come across day in, day out that you're just like, face palm?
Yeah, well, that's one of them.
Okay.
People still deciding you're going to hang code stuff. Like, I don't get it. I just don't get it. You can have a beautiful graphical design tool. Look, and some of it comes back to arcane knowledge of the wizards of IT, We want to keep this arcane knowledge to ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one. I think, probably one of the second things I think is, when we talked about it, is, how do we plan well in advance for what's going to happen? Because we know that in 2 or 3 years, there'll be a full iteration of people probably within an organisation that are on any given project. So how do we make sure that project endures beyond that? So lack of forward planning in that perspective, which is, I guess, kind of tied into the change management side of it as well.
Yeah.
And then third, I think, is an overabundance of caution at the moment in the marketplace, particularly right now.
Yeah.
And look, everybody's got to be cautious. We talk about risk. You don't want to jump in and make hasty decisions. But, if we look at AI, for instance, there's a lot of people sort of hanging back and go, oh, let's wait and see what happens. Like, well, you don't actually need to do that. Nothing will happen. But what you do need to do is get your house in order first.
Yeah.
And there's 2 or 3 fundamental things about AI when you need to understand. One is it can only decide on the data you give it. 2 is it doesn't know when it's lying, and it can't tell when it's not telling you the truth.
Yeah.
And at some point, maybe we may train it to do that. And at that point, then we worry about Skynet, probably.
Yeah. That's such
that risk aversion in the market is very high at the moment, to the point that I think if we look at how many times we're seeing the big GSIs being called in to assist in decision making. I mean, we all know why that is. It's because nobody there really wants to be responsible for it. They want to pick the GSI they recommended it. Yeah. That's ultimately why that path is adopted, I think, as well as to inform them, of course, of their options they may not be aware of.
Yeah, we're seeing that as well, aren't we? Like the caution in the market is just like next level.
It is next level.
And it always is around this time of year, just generally in recruitment and in the data space, but it's still bubbles. But at the moment, everyone's like, oh, should we? I don't know. Let me ask this 5th person before I make a decision.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Normally this is the time of year when most software vendors dread, because typically customers have been working feverishly to complete an RFI or an RFP and toss it over the fence in the next few weeks. And so we want that back in January. Thanks.
Yeah.
Some questions of that.
Yeah.
And everybody goes, oh my God, there goes my leave.
Yeah.
So we've seen a couple of those, but last year it was very quiet. I mean, I think last year it was, on the software world, was a particularly quiet year for most vendors.
Yeah. Okay. Got you. What about, I was interested from the sales angle, because like we've not really done historically pre-sales or sales recruitment from a data perspective, just because we tend to go really niche. But like, do you have any advice for someone who is really strong background technically, but interested to go into that sales sort of realm that has that maybe gravitas that they could build on?
I mean, you've got to be 2/5 show pony, really.
Yeah, Sean, you'd be good at it.
Yeah, there you go.
We can have a chat after this, Mark.
I mean, I went into pre-sales from software development, which was an easy transition.
Yeah.
And anybody who knows me will tell you that I'm at least 2/5 show pony. So that was quite easy for me. But, you know, and then that transition to sales, well, as you highlighted, it turns out it's kind of been in my genes since day one. I think my mother said I should either be a lawyer or a salesman. So I think she's happy that I ended up in sales, not law.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, the advice would be, you know, if you're going into a pre-sales role, I mean, you've got to put aside some of those preconceptions about what I'm doing must work and must be like it's smoke and mirrors 90% of the time, because we're just doing something on the fly for these people. So be prepared to let go of that mindset that says, you know, this has got to be production ready.
You need to have, like, you've obviously came from a software development background.
Yeah.
If someone is midway through their career and is thinking of that switch on both sides of the table, so you've got maybe a sales guy who doesn't have a tech background, or on the flip side, you've got the tech background guy who wants to jump into sales. Which one do you think has a better...
I mean, tech to sales for sure.
Tech to sales.
Trying to make a developer out of a salesman,
It's a rarity.
Trying to make a cat into a dog there, I think, you know, it's just not going to happen. But I think it's much easier to go the other way, because there's having that the technical understanding of clients' needs and what's possible means that you can potentially, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, most software categories today have multiple players in them. Very few of them are not commoditized to some extent. And so the way people can differentiate is by either their sales, you know, their product obviously first and foremost, but in many categories that's really difficult to differentiate now. It's the blue one or the red one or the green one. They all do pretty much the same. How are you going to choose?
Yeah.
And so what you're left with is, well, we've got to provide a better experience. I've got I'm recruiting for a role at the moment. For one role, I had 97 applicants in the sales role, which is just insane.
Yeah.
And some of them I look at the resumes and go, did you read my ad? I mean, seriously. Is that just have you got some RPA replying to you?
Probably.
But out of that, some real gems. I mean, there's some fantastic people on the market, because, you know, the market slowed down in the last year. Pretty much every large vendor, every vendor's had layoffs. Many of the smaller companies have folded up shop in Australia and pulled back. So
yeah, it's a bit.
Definitely that capacity for integrity and authenticity is very important.
Yeah, you can't do the cold calling. Like, do you want a job? Okay, cool, bye.
Yeah.
Do you want my shiny dashboard?
Got a job? What do you got? You got a job? What do you got?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've had a lot with our clients as well. Like the conversion rate between applicants to interviews is just so low, because it's like, I suppose, mass amount of people on the market, which is a shame. What about for you? Obviously, your team, like you've already mentioned, you're recruiting. If someone's listening right now, what can they sort of expect coming in under your leadership, into your team, the culture?
Yeah, great question. Look, I think for me, you know, I've been in leadership roles now for, 15, 20 years. And I always sort of try and bring the same thing to it all. And one of those, that there's no dark corners. So, like, you know, full transparency of everything that's going on to the team. You know, from my perspective, I don't want to hire somebody I've got to handhold indefinitely. Clearly, I mean, nobody wants that. But I do not want to be a micromanager. That is just not my thing. I hate it. I hate doing it. Hate seeing it. So that's not me. So, you know, I think we've got to, and I often describe my role to team members that put myself as a shield. And I use another word to describe that, something else, shield. And you know, because I think what the role of you know, as country manager, I'm essentially a middle manager. So I need to both shield my manager who runs, you know, APAC, five big busy geographies. So I need to manage all of that stuff so that he only hears important noise. Yeah. And also need to make sure that my team is somewhat insulated from, you know, his noise, because sometimes sales leaders get very noisy, and the further you get away from the coalface when you're a sales leader, the less empathy you have for the sales guy and at the coalface. You know, it's like, just get it done. I don't know how, just get it done. And you slam the phone down. And you're 3 levels of reporting down. It's like, oh, man, how am I going to do that? And I mean, I have sat in a lobby and stalked people for meetings in days gone by. So in my team, I encourage, collaboration, openness. We put up everybody's results on screen. We have a weekly all hands, very short, sharp all hands meetings. Everybody knows what's going on. Open door policy, and try to be authentic. There we go again.
Yeah,
I
it's your
think.
Kiwi background probably. Maybe I'm
possibly.
biased. No.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we say it how it is, good or bad.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm as WYSIWYG as you get.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I feel like we've covered a lot of different topics like tech debt, Gen AI, the boom, how to like mitigate risk or manage risk, I should say, embrace the complexity. Obviously, Qlik and yourself and your journey and sales team as well. Was there anything else that you would want to say or cover at this point that?
Look, I think since our focus is on AI, sort of in this podcast, I think, my advice to organisations considering it is just get in and have a play. Get in and do it. There's actually very little risk in starting off a small experiment now. There's no risk. But before you do that, make sure your data's in order. I think that if Gartner have got up the 3 most important things to have to be AI ready, and having your data AI ready is number one. So I think, get in there, build that big foundation, put a little cottage on at the start, crank the handle a few times, see what happens.
Good analogy there.
Yeah, I think so.
You don't need a mansion, you just need a small cottage. Awesome. Any parting words from you, Sean?
I've a lot to think of right now. I suppose my final one would be Qlik. Where do you see yourselves going with the AI boom? Like, what the next
interesting.
2-5 years look like?
Yeah, so I think you'll just see us integrating it more and more into the available capabilities. So, like I said, we already, you can already use, integrate any of the Gen AI APIs directly into the interface of our dashboards and so forth. And so I think what we'll see is just a continuing refinement of that and the machine learning aspect of it. I think how we surface that to the pane of glass is one thing, but I think the other thing that is how do we use it more intelligently in our data journey from the disk to the consumer. And there's a lot of areas in there that are currently automated, but a lot of those areas also require, human intervention to make calls. And I think there's opportunity for automation, more automation through that part of the process, or more AI capacity to make sure that's happening the right way.
Yeah. So you don't think it? Obviously, some people are going around. It's a race against time at the moment, but as you said at the start, it's not just start.
No,
And
yeah,
go.
just have a crack.
Go.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Mark,
Thank you.
for your
Thanks for having
time.
me.
Good
it was a
chat.
pleasure.
Chat.
Very,
All
very
right.
interesting.